One of the things I've always admired about Arcane's games is their character movement. It always feels fluid and encourages different modes of play, from sprinting over rooftops to sneaking under bridges. Giving the player this level of freedom in the ways that they can traverse the map is part of the definition of that immersive sim feel. The addition of a high jump height, mantling, and blink also enables a level design that can really make use of verticality in a way that I really like. So, given all that, I've tried to implement a new character controller from scratch that attempts to capture some of that feeling, and in this devlog I'll go over a few of its features and how it works. A lot of games allow you to control the height of your jump in a very specific way by how long you hold the jump button. This allows for a lot of control, but it's also kind of unpredictable. So my game only allows for 2 jump heights. When you jump normally, you will do a simple jump that is always the same height, but if you hold the jump button for a particular length of time, 0.85 seconds in this case, your character will be launched upwards again at the same speed. Normally, this might make precise jumps difficult, but because my controller also includes mantling over ledges, in practice it's very easy to get where you want to go. In terms of implementation, there's not much to this, just start counting when the player presses the jump button, and if they pass the threshold and haven't touched the ground yet, set their upwards velocity back to some positive value, and then let gravity take over. Moving the camera independent from the actual character collider is a good way to make the player feel the physical weight of the character as they move around. In my game, I have the normal, simple sinusoidal head bob that is pretty standard. It simply takes your character velocity and modifies the frequency and amplitude of a sine wave, and then applies that to the character's X and Y position. The parameters are changed when you crouch as you go into a bit more of a waddle. But you can also apply this kind of movement to imply inertia of the character. So when my character hits the ground, you can see that the camera dips down and springs back up. Again, this doesn't actually affect the position or shape of the character collider, it's just camera movement. In this case, the camera is modeled as a literal weight on a spring using Hooke's equations. When the player hits the ground, I set the downward velocity of the weight to be the same as the player's when they hit the ground, and then let the spring dictate the position of the camera. If you set all the parameters right, you get a nice satisfying springiness that changes depending on how hard you hit the ground. Once I add in a view model, which also has some inertia, it'll sell the effect even more. If you're not familiar with the term, mantling is the process of climbing up a ledge of some kind. Adding mantling to the game has 2 purposes. Firstly, it allows the player a little bit more vertical movement capability without giving them an absurd, hard-to-control jump height, but also it allows them more precision in their movement. If the player is right in front of some boxes and they jump, it's likely that they want to be on top of the box rather than awkwardly leaping 10 feet into the air to land on a 3-foot high box. And since my game only has 2 discrete jump heights, that makes it even harder for the player to accurately jump a particular height. So in this case, you would just press the mantle button and you would just step up onto the thing in front of you. Implementing this was actually easier than I expected it to be. I created a new component in Godot, which I called the climb controller, which is not a great name because it doesn't actually control any climbing. Essentially, the only purpose of this component is to assess whether or not a climb is currently possible, which is a 2-step process. Firstly, it uses a shape cast to see if the player is stood in front of a wall. I use a shape cast here rather than a simple ray cast because I want the player to be able to mantle on top of essentially any object they find themselves in front of, even if that would, in practical terms, only be stepping up onto something. If I used just rays, then I'd have to use rays at several points up and down the character, and there's a chance that I would miss a ledge in some particular configuration. Once the controller is sure we're against a wall, I use a second shape cast to cast a cube that's about the size of a ledge that we would be able to stand on, slightly in front of and above the player. The purpose of the second cast is to figure out how high the ledge is, where the floor is. Because a shapecast will only hit things along the path and not the things it starts in, then this also stops very high walls from being mantleable. It'll never detect the floor. And you can set the maximum height of the mantle just by whatever the position the shapecast starts at. Once I have the floor height, it's just a matter of taking control of the player and then moving them up to the destination of the climb. If they let go of jump at any point, then we just stop the climb and let gravity take over and they'll fall back down. I'm not totally happy with the mantling movement right now. It feels a little bit floaty and lacks inertia. This might be fixed with some audio cues, but it also might need a bit more camera movement, maybe a bit of looking down or a little bit of left-right motion. I'm not sure yet. Okay, that's it for this video. Please like and subscribe and all that jazz, and I'll see you next time.